Welcome to Indiana Sports Beat Radio, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Know your role and shut your mouth, you jabroni!
Fires upfield into the end zone, and it's caught. Jelani Woods, touchdown! ISB!
A 43-point night for Tyrese Halliburton.
How do you like that, partner?
Galloway drives all the way to the hole, throws it up, got it! Indiana's got their first lead of this contest.
I mean, that's a goddamn winner right there.
Now, from the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios, here's your host, Jim Coyle.
Hello, everybody. Welcome aboard. Thanks a lot for joining us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio on this Monday, July 31st. First day of the week, last day of the month. Appreciate you joining us. Of course, brought to you by and powered by Andy Moore Honda. Just go to andymoorehonda.com to get more to your door and the best in new and used vehicles. And the family of restaurants in and around the Bloomington area of Endeavor Hospitality. Great places like the Chop Shop, former BB's, that has an incredible selection of custom meats, the most in-house made products, and a brand new steakhouse next door where you can stop by and check that out. So make sure you do that. On the program today, Dustin Dopirak will be joining us. Looking forward to that, as well as Mitt Winter, sports attorney. We're going to talk a little bit about the NIL situation that we keep talking about so much, and the need for congressional interaction, something to put some rules down. But we'll talk to Mitt about that and plenty more. Appreciate you guys joining us here on the program, as well as always. John Boy, back to keep us between the white lines.
I know it's quite the job having to keep things between the white lines.
Well, it's supposed to be. If it was easy, anybody could do it.
That's right.
That's what I always say. How was your weekend?
It was a good weekend. Very hot, though. I'm ready for these temperatures to cool down a little bit. I think we're going to get a little relief today and maybe tomorrow, too.
Yeah, it seemed like it was not bad out there. The humidity was did not seem terrible.
Looking forward to going to the lake this coming weekend. I haven't been to the lake at all this year. Going up to Patoka.
Get a little Indiana in your life.
That's right. Get the Indiana back in my life.
I never have enough of that. Good morning to Dogface Pony Soldier hitting us up on the Andy Moore Honda hotline, as is Mike, Five Lefts, Justin, Kent. I mentioned congressional interaction on NIL, and Dogface says we don't need no more government in our lives, which I agree, but they need something, because that's going to run amok if they don't. It's so funny, though, that all these coaches that are complaining, I really don't know what they're complaining about, though, to be honest with you. Because the ones that are doing the complaining are like coaches from the SEC. I'm like, what are you all bitching about? You all been doing this forever. Now all of a sudden it's a problem? Whatever. It just cracks me up. But there definitely needs to be some rules in place, man. But the thing is, we are closer, and what's the word I'm looking for? Profit sharing. However you want to label it. Paying employees, paying the players, I mean, just flat out. That's coming. At least it is in football. It has to be. And if they do it in one, they won't do it. They won't do it in one without doing it in others. But programs like Indiana, I think they have to have this. I think that it's going to be something that has to be mandated, because it's not something Indiana is going to do on their own. But to keep even in the realm of competitive nature, Indiana is going to have to do something like that, in my opinion. Now, where are you going to come up with that money? I don't know. I've mentioned on here before that I know that Oklahoma players make $70,000 minimum. So if we take, there's 85 scholarship players, and multiply that times 70,000. That's basically $6 million. Just for that. $6 million. So that figure that Ryan Day talked about over a year ago of needing $13 million. Well, that's $6 million right there, and that's just the baseline. Let's just say if it was Texas, how many linemen are there? 20? That's $1 million right there just to keep your linemen happy at $50,000 each. Good morning, Cheryl Sizemore. Good morning, Pete. Caleb. Yes. Kevin. Monroeville. How are things? Dave G, how are you? We'll talk more about profit sharing, and it's probably necessity. But yes, the Reds, I think they lost one to the Dodgers the other day, but won big last night. I think like 9-0 or something. I think I saw that score before I dozed off into Neverland. Pull these scores up real quick. Joey Votto going deep. Yeah, thank you, Braves. 8-6 over the Brewers. Pirates still winning. They beat the Phillies. But the Reds do beat the Dodgers 9-0, baby. Where are they? What are the game out now? Trying to get to the stinking standings.
Reds are actually back in the lead of the NL Central.
Get out of here, baby.
They're a half game ahead of the Brewers.
There you go. And for the first time this year, they are in the plus differential, run differential. I've been talking about that. The Central Division is like the only division in all of baseball that had not only was neither their leading team or their second place team had a positive run differential and runs scored, runs for, runs against. And now the Reds are +3, baby, on the year. The closest divisional leader to them in that category, Minnesota in the other Central Division is +34. But here's some anomalies. Baltimore leads the National League East, the toughest division in all of baseball. They're only +48 on the year, while Tampa Bay, who's right behind them, is +135. That's a lot of runs. They've scored 561 runs. Ooh, that's nothing compared to Texas, though, who scored 609 runs. Man, they score a lot. Atlanta, 583. Cincinnati, 520. Whoo. Kind of gives you, you can extrapolate that out to the postseason. But the Reds are back in front. The Cubs had won 8 in a row until yesterday. How about Chicago? They're only 4 games out. That's the funny thing. This Central Division in the National League, while it kind of sucks, it's kind of fun at the same time because you got fans of everybody. You got Cincinnati, and no, really Milwaukee, but the Cubs, Pittsburgh, and St. Louis. We've got fans of all those teams. St. Louis, they're out of it. Pittsburgh, I really can't believe that they've continued to drop like they have. They're 10 games back. Chicago, though, with that burst, now only 4 games back. How about that? That'll be something. That's going to be a battle. Reds have won 7 out of their last 10. Chicago's won 8 out of their last 10. Milwaukee, 4 out of their last 10. So there's that. Oh, yeah, the Jonathan Taylor debacle. That's, yeah, you know. It is what it is. I get it on all sides, to be honest with you. Jonathan Taylor is wants the loyalty that he feels he's shown to the Colts, and would like for them to show that back. But the truth of the matter is they can probably go out and replace him at pretty close to the same price. You hate to see it, but I don't know. Where's he going to go? What's he going to do? Is he going to get more money someplace? Is he going to find a program or a franchise that really likes him more? I doubt it. Running backs have become a unique position in the NFL. It's weird. They were, forever one of the longest, or most for the longest time, one of the most important positions. You think of some of the greats, Walter Payton. Just these guys that were so integral into the offense, now not so much. I mean, look at Derrick Henry. He was the baddest man that's been around for a while. Didn't really do squat for Tennessee, though. And that dude's a bad man. So we'll keep up with that. The Pac-12 and the Big 12, that continues to be a saga. I don't know what the Pac-12 is going to do. They have just been so poorly run for a while now. And that poor leadership is going to bury them. They are going to go from being one of the top, Power 5 conferences to not, I think. And that's hard for me to believe since they had the West Coast. I mean, you've got the entire West Coast, man. So that to me is such a huge advantage. And they've blown it. They lost Colorado back to the Pac-12. Back to the Big 12. And the Big 12, on the other hand, I've said this number of times now, has just utterly amazed me. Not only have they remained relevant, but they keep adding the right pieces. They just keep adding the right pieces to stay solid, to stay who they are. And it's working for them. And it's going to work for them. Their basketball has been fun to watch. Their football has been fun to watch. And now it's rumored that they're not done. Maybe Arizona State on the horizons, possibly. Let's see. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark continues to target not only Arizona and Arizona State, but Utah and UConn. And UConn, while that sounds crazy, UConn needs it in a desperate way. They're stuck in no man's land. They're just up there in no man's land. And they have nothing The Big East is not. The Big East is without football.
Right.
So there's plenty there. Man, all kinds of talk about that. We'll talk about that more with Dustin Dopirak. Lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Thanks a lot for being with us. We appreciate you. Back with more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the market, I did not know that.
Me neither.
Brett Yormick's an IU grad? I'll be damned. I'll be damned. I'll be damned. Jason, thank you. I had no idea. I can't believe that. I can't believe that I didn't know that, number one. The AD for Penn State is an IU grad. The AD for IU is an IU grad. The AD for Bradley's an IU grad. The former head of the Pac-12, I can't remember his name. I don't think it was Klavikoff. That's the current one. But the one before that, his kid was a walk-on for IU basketball.
Excuse me.
I had no idea. Thank you so much, Jason. I had no idea. That blows my mind. That blows my mind.
All right. 30 seconds.
Beer Cabello is locally owned and operated by Endeavor Hospitality Group. Launched from a previous staple in Bloomington, the former Function Brewery, Metalworks Brewing Company is the culmination of a passion for beer, food, and custom metal art. Check out their custom growlers. Metalworks Brewing Company has an updated menu, new brews, and will be offered in all Endeavor Hospitality restaurants. Come taste with Dr. Hobbs' Brewing. Metalworks Brewing Company. Bring your passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Southern Stone Restaurant. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back on this Monday, July 31st. Hope you're having a great day. Good start to your week. Appreciate you being with us. Weather looks to be nice. Just we're talking about Big 12, Pac-12, all that stuff. But Brett Yorkman, I hate to admit stuff like this, but I had no idea he was an IU grad, the commissioner of the Big 12, and a great background that he has working. He basically took Brooklyn or the New York Nets to when they became the Brooklyn Nets. Negotiated several marquee deals for the Barclays Center. CEO of Brooklyn Sports Entertainment. He's spent 14 years with the Nets organization. That's a hell of a run. He left in 2019. He left there amid an ownership change, only to be hired by Jay-Z to run Rock Nation. And then in 2022, he left Rock Nation to take over the Big 12 conference. But that's pretty cool. It blows my mind. His brother, twin brother, Michael Yorkman, also in business and sports entertainment executive. He currently serves as president and chief of branding and strategy at Rock Nation, as well as president and CEO of Sunrise Sports and Entertainment of the Florida Panthers organization. So it runs in the family. But that is, I did not know that. Something you learn every day. That just sticks in my mind when I something like that. Yeah. There's a lot of great, with all these great administrators, former IU people, it makes you wonder, why did IU go through so much trouble? You know, why would they, with all of this experience out there, not now with Scott Dolson, who has tons of experience doing that, but prior to that, why would you hire an athletics director who had never been an athletics director? Just a question. But for a school that has so much talent out in the sports administration world, why would you be a school that hires an AD with zero experience? I mean, that happened a long time ago, obviously. No, I'm not talking about Scott. Prior to that, it's just mind-boggling. It's mind-boggling to me. What is it going to be, and what are these conferences going to be like now? If the Pac-12 continues to, they're going to just continue to decompress. If the Big 12 is going after Arizona State, and Utah, Colorado's now gone, USC, UCLA are gone, then what if the Big 10 said, all right, well, I guess we're going to go ahead and take Washington and Oregon? That's it. I mean, that would be it for the Pac-12. The Pac-12 would basically become the Mountain West. I mean, I said a long time ago, the Pac-12 should have merged with the Big 12. They have missed their opportunity. They have lost the TV markets. They have Los Angeles, but yet they don't have a team. Pac-12 does not have a single team in that market now. What's going to happen with the ACC? With football so bad, but yet they have a TV contract, media rights deal that runs through the early 2030s. Those teams, what's going to become of those programs? It's college sports is going to continue to just really change. Now, I do not think that this is going to be a situation where there's 20 teams that is buying all the players. Nah, that's not going to happen. There's too many. It takes too many, and there are too many players out there. Even for football. especially when I see this many SEC coaches complaining, I'm like, they're fine. Because if they're complaining, it's bad for everybody. And whether it's just good for a certain few, well, that was the case before. But it's kind of hard to tell who it's so good for because everybody's complaining. Nick Saban complains. Lane Kiffin's complaining. Who are the coaches that aren't complaining? Jim Harbaugh's not complaining. Ryan Day's not complaining. Georgia, they're not complaining. Is John complaining? Ed asked, will the Big 12 go, or will the Pac-12 network go under now? Well, will the Pac-12 go under? That's the thing. Forget about the Pac-12 network. It's the Pac-12.
I don't think the Pac-12 network was ever doing good numbers.
I don't know that there is such a thing, is there?
No, there is a Pac-12 network. It's not super easy to access unless you're one of those people that has like the major sports packages on your cable provider or whatever it is you use to watch your sports.
Yeah, it's
there's also a Mountain West network, or at least there used to be. I don't know if
there's a Mountain West conference. There's the Mountain West Conference. So I'm sure that I guess that they have their own quote unquote network. That's generally just ESPN putting that stuff together.
Yep.
On Thursday, Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh said that last Thursday he cannot discuss the ongoing investigation of NCAA violations inside of his program that could lead to a 4-game suspension. Quote, I'm not allowed to talk about any aspect of that ongoing situation, Harbaugh said. I'd love to lay it all out here. There's nothing to be ashamed of, but now is not the time. You lied. You lied to the NCAA, jackass. It's pretty simple. Nothing to be ashamed of. Nothing to see here, people. Harbaugh is facing level 1 violations, a level 1 violation, the most significant, according to the NCAA rules, for lying to the NCAA while they continued their investigation into recruiting violations. Harbaugh would miss games against East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, and Rutgers should he officially receive the 4-game suspension. Like that matters. As a program, Michigan is facing 4 level 2 violations. A team that many think has a shot at winning the national championship this year. I mean, it's serious in that regard, but East Carolina, UNLV, Bowling Green, Rutgers, yeah, that should not matter. Former Northwestern linebacker Simba Short is now the 5th former Wildcat football player to file a lawsuit against the school, saying that he suffered emotional and psychological trauma from being hazed while in the program. Horse crap. Short played at Northwestern for 2 seasons in 2015 and 16 before medically retiring. He is the second player to publicly identify himself in a lawsuit against the school. Short's lawsuit alleges that former head coach Pat Fitzgerald knew or should have known about the alleged hazing activities in the program. Fitzgerald, who was fired for cause on July 10th after originally receiving just a 2-week suspension, has maintained that he had no knowledge of those alleged incidences. The lawsuit says the alleged hazing activities led Short to a mental health crisis and self-harm incident that led him to being in the hospital in 2016. No former Northwestern players are named in the lawsuit. Funny how none of that stuff ever comes out until a lawsuit is filed. What are you going to do? What are you going to do? Again, it's not. Mike, how are you, sir? We appreciate you jumping on the Andy Moore Honda hotline down there in French Lick. Following Colorado, I talked about Colorado's move to the Big 12. Following that, ACC commissioner and former Northwestern athletic director Jim Phillips told ESPN that the ACC is open to expansion, but formidable targets have yet to arise. Well, who the hell was going to join the ACC? Why would somebody? You'd have to be in a very bad situation to join the ACC. They're screwed in their media rights deal until like 2036. There's no reason anybody would join the ACC unless you're East Carolina or someone like that. Quote, the ACC has been and remains highly engaged in looking at anything that makes us better and stronger, Phillips told ESPN. We spent considerable time on expansion to see if there is anything that fits. We have a tremendous group of institutions, but if there was something that made us better, we would absolutely be open to it. Yeah, like a program that has football. Currently, ACC members are locked into the conference until 2036 through their conference's grant of rights agreement with ESPN. The grant of rights provides the conference's schools with the third largest media distribution across conferences behind the Big Ten and SEC. So all is not terrible. Revenue generation continues to be a priority, but this league is third right now on revenue as we go forward into whatever the next TV deals are. I don't know how in the world they stay ahead of the Big 12 in that regard. That'll probably change. This summer, the ACC announced an uneven revenue distribution model that allows the conference's most successful programs to receive larger payments than less prosperous schools. We'll see how that goes over. Illinois' Brett Bielema said on Wednesday at Big Ten Media Days that the 2-year contract extension he signed with Fighting Illini includes a non-compete for Big Ten schools, meaning he's not able to leave Illinois for another head coaching job in the conference. The clause in Bielema's contract, which is set to pay him $6 million annually, goes through 2028. $6 million a year, baby. That's a commitment to football there. Illinois is committed. And it's going to be, I think that's going to work for them. He's a good coach. Illinois is a program that I think that can rise back up, but they're no different than Indiana if they're able to do it. If they're able to do it, anybody can do it. Your school has to commit to it. How committed to football do you think Indiana really is? See, honestly, perfect. We've got plenty more coming up. Dustin Dopirak will join us next. Matt Winter in the second hour, sports attorney. Lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Back with it right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Whether it's
meeting, and then everything all of a sudden becomes quiet again. No, Jason, you did tweet out that there might be other schools other than Arizona considering the move outside of it. I know that you don't want to continue to wildly speculate, but do you think that people how does it work? Do they call Colorado? Go, what have they told you, or do they start having meetings? What do you think happens here after this?
Yeah, I think Colorado, they see how much Colorado signed up for. They see what Colorado was told they're going to get by the Big 12, and then they go to the Big 12 and say, can we get some of that? And then they go to George, and if George doesn't have a clear update, well, what are you going to do? And I know I'll be very transparent. I don't know the school that is looking to leave with Arizona and maybe whatever, but I was told from a very good source that it is a school that is not being talked about within the Pac-12. My first inkling would be Oregon, and because I don't think Cal or Stanford will ever leave the Pac-12. I don't think there's enough money with Washington State and Oregon State. We've talked about Utah. We've talked about ASU. Oregon I would lead to, and I don't know if that's going to happen or whatever, but I believe that now what you'll hear about is more schools having conversations with the Big 12 and looking to kind of get out or at least gauge some interest with some financial numbers and all that.
Man, if that was the case, I mean, do you imagine how bad that TV deal must be to force an Oregon, or someone like that? Just seems like it would be crazy. And obviously, we can unpack that at a later date. When did you?
Dun, 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 dun. I am hungry, yeah.
You know who else might be hungry? Dustin Dopirak. You said that right when he got into the green room. That's why.
How's Mr. Dustin?
Doing well, Jim. How you?
Good, buddy. You look like you're traveling.
I'm not.
No. There, he's
There's
back in your spot.
There's your green background right there.
There you go, back in the spot.
Would you mind wiping your camera eye off a little bit?
Sure. Hold on. Better?
Yes, much better.
Okay. Cool.
Did you know that Brett Yorkman, the commissioner of the Big 12, is an IU grad?
I didn't know there was a man named Brett Yorkman until you just mentioned him.
I did not either. So thank you very much. I felt like a complete idiot. I was like, wow, really?
I totally missed that announcement. I've just been catching up on college football right now. I'm presuming we're going to talk a little bit of IU football, and I had to remind myself of who all is on the team.
They have a team?
Apparently.
All right, here we go, guys. Nutritious meal prep.
They're going to run somebody out there.
The Fresh Fork takes care of all the planning, shopping, and prepping and can even deliver them to your doorstep once a week. That's right. It's the fastest, simplest, and easiest way to avoid decision fatigue. You pick your plan and pick up at BB's Market with no extra charge. So leave the heavy lifting to us and enjoy healthy eating with stocked meals in your fridge. Order online today at thefreshfork.com. Fresh Fork is a proud partner of WOW Network. This segment is brought to you by Remax Advanced Realty, Indie Home Pros team by Cheryl Sizemore. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Monday. It's July 31st. Thanks a lot for joining us. Appreciate you greatly. Joined now by Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Star. How are you, sir?
Doing well, Jim. How about yourself?
I cannot complain. Nobody wants to listen to it. So I will not bore anyone with it. How was your weekend?
Good. Went home to Pittsburgh. Family reunion. Sorry, Maxine has thoughts. She had a whole blast of a weekend. Everybody was giving her free food and pets and such, and she got all the attention she needed for a week. But now she's back to Indianapolis and telling everybody what they're allowed to do on my street because she patrols the place. So that's what's going on. But no, a good weekend.
You should get some signs up, just post them outside Maxine's place.
Yeah. Oh, you don't have to post any signs. The whole entire neighborhood can hear her every day. So there's no, if you had functional ears, Maxine's here and she's, she's working the street and telling everybody how many permits they're violating by being where they're not supposed to be.
Dustin is normally is on the Pacers beat, but right now Pacers are the only thing that's kind of going really smoothly. Right? They have no problems. They've got people signed. They've got the guys that they're going to have, as opposed to say the Colts, who are having all kinds of dysfunction going on there, and now it's just getting worse. Especially as we're
we're right around the corner from training camp.
Yeah, I mean, wow.
Actually, it's already started. Actually,
you're in training camp. You've begun training camp, and this is sort of gone wild. I mean, like I said, I was out of town all weekend, and I was just. I'm back. Okay, sorry, just blanked out there real fast. No, she says good morning too, Kevin. No, so I'm just even piecing this together myself as to what happened with Jonathan Taylor. So I don't know what Irsay is doing here. Obviously, it plays into what has become a national narrative about running backs, basically, and sort of the way that they're disrespected. And I think obviously Greg Doyle wrote a column from us, like partially agreed with, because I think that the like you understand where things are coming from a team standpoint is these guys don't give you a whole lot of years of effectiveness. And so, there's not a whole lot of differential between, your best guys and your next best guys or whatever. There's kind of plug in and play. And you can only really be so effective in the run game at this point, because I think, defenses are just so fast, and basically you have to be a really premium athlete to produce anything that's worth a whole lot of money. But on the same flip side, the reason for that is because it's a brutal position. It's one of the most it's one of the most brutal positions in sports, and there's a reason why, it's hard to make it to 30 and be effective at that spot. And so it's almost like the union needs to get involved. I mean, I was actually talking to some cousins yesterday. We were sitting around, the family reunion, and everyone's like, "Oh, Dustin, the sports writer's here. Let's talk to him about, sports things." And
his cousin from Boston.
They're all from Pittsburgh. But no, I said, hey, it's almost like they need something like combat pay. I mean, it's almost like the union needs to get involved, and there's got to be sort of a separate structure financially for running backs, and a different way for them to be taken care of, because it doesn't make sense financially for teams to overspend on a running back. But on the flip side, when you're looking at a position that is really important to the sport, that is really physically demanding, and that takes years off your body, quickly, there almost needs to be a separate way of addressing them, and a different sort of form of doing this, because it's just like they still have to exist, they still have to do the job, and they have to be spectacular athletes to do it in even a functional level. But yet it doesn't make it doesn't make a lot of financial sense to pay them a whole lot of money. But it's just like, these guys are unbelievable. To be that good, you've got to be just absolutely incredibly fast and strong and powerful and willing to take an absolute beating and not fumble the football. And yet, you can only really be effective at it for a couple of years before your body just doesn't have the juice to do it anymore. So that something needs to give there for these guys to be taken care of. But I was just even piecing together last night. Taylor's saying he's never had a back injury, and the Colts are floating the idea of putting him on the PUP non-injury football list. That sounds fraudulent to me. And so I'm just picking up what's going down. So I don't know who's reporting what or where that's coming from or whatever. But man, things devolved really, really quickly over there.
Yeah, and that part there is with him refuting the injury. That's even making it worse now. Like you said, that makes it look like that they're trying to do something that they shouldn't be doing, which will in turn get the Colts in trouble.
Yeah, no, it's like I said, I don't know what's what. I don't know who's reporting what. I don't know the specifics of, what, injuries obviously are an interesting thing in the NFL. They, you have to report every day in practice once you get to the season. You have to put out a practice report Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. And that's, there's a whole lot of issues there as far as, the gambling connection to football and all these things. And, there has to be some level of transparency that isn't even necessary in some of the other professional sports. Certainly you don't have it in college. You don't have to disclose all of those things. There's not some kind of league-wide rule that says so. guys get season-ending injuries in Indiana football, and if they're not starters, we don't find not even not starters. If they're not players, if they're not guys that play, we don't even find out about it until months later sometimes. Like you're just like, hey, Bryson Bonds hasn't been out there for a while and stuff like that. Like what's his deal? Where, NFL, you got to report it all the time. And to say something like, especially if you're going to say someone had a non-football injury, because I'm pretty sure that's a contract CBA dispute, in terms of what gets taken care of and what their future contract thing is, because, you're sort of telling somebody, kind of putting it out there that you injured yourself not playing football. And if you do that, it functions differently. I don't know exactly how, but that's basically making an accusation that you weren't taking care of yourself, that you were going out there and doing stuff that was not necessarily a part of your job, and you got hurt doing that. I guess it playing basketball or something like that are some of the typical reasons why something like that happens. But if they're saying like he got hurt doing something that wasn't football, and Taylor's like, no, I didn't, like one, it causes a whole lot of distrust between coach and player, and coach and organization and player. And again, there's a fraudulent element to it. I don't know if it's legal based fraud, but it's fraudulent.
Well, then even if they, get this back around, it's
what happens then?
How do you expect him to give 110%? How do you count on him to give 110%? It's just it's just not a good way to start the year, especially with the situations they've been in with the quarterback and all the other problems they've had, kind of trying to get all that smoothed out. And now you've got what is kind of an unnecessary issue.
Yeah, no, it's a really bad situation. Again, for where they are as a franchise, you're in a really bad place, because obviously this was supposed to be the season where you're start to, you got a new quarterback, first, number 4 overall pick. This is a reset, whenever you, kind of have to redo your quarterback situation. It's a reset. And so you got to get all the other pieces in line, especially when you're talking about your most talented offensive player. And obviously he didn't have the season he hoped to last year, and he was dealing with injuries and stuff, but like, this is your most talented offensive player, that's in any way established that has had a great season and been a really productive guy. That these are the sort of guys you need to count on. And if, you're going into it with a new quarterback, but your running back is not okay with anything that's going on, that just puts everything in a bad place to start with. So it's like, how long are you going to go with this? Is this sort of sit in, whatever you want to call what Taylor's been doing? How long is this going to go? And, it could go a lot longer when it comes to this kind of stuff. And he wants a trade. And so if you get through it and keep him, which is going to be difficult, what does that look like? But even the other issue is, even if you move him, what kind of return do you get, on this kind of deal, because they know, other teams know you got a problem. And so other teams are going to operate differently if they know you have a problem, and you're going to look around and find out what you have. And their scenario is going to like, you got to move this guy. So I'm not going to give you, like 100 cents on the dollar. Like you're not getting everything from me that you would usually get. I'm going to negotiate in kind, knowing that you've got a deadline, and I don't. And so, that's going to be a situation where the return they can get, the more they mess around, the more they mess with their return if they are going to trade him.
Yeah, and not only that, it's just now with the reports about the back injuries, those have to be coming from somebody on the inside, or that's being floated. One would think that's being floated. That's not, like, don't muddy the waters like that. So that's not a good situation for the Colts on the Colts side.
Yeah, no, it's not good. It's not good. I'm just kind of catching up with this, like, as we're talking. I've got our Joel Erickson's piece up right now about this, so I'm just kind of like, he's educating me as we're talking. But yeah, it's It's just not good, man. It's just not good at all. So yeah, it's just really rough start to Colts camp for sure.
Yep, absolutely. And we'll find out how it starts going once the season gets started. Luckily, like I said earlier, the Pacers seem to have things in place on who and what they want. Kevin K-Bro pointing out that, oh yeah, Mr. Florida says Anthony Richardson will save them.
Well, he might, but shoot. Hi, Kevin. Good to see you. No, I mean, he might, but this is a tough situation for a rookie to be thrown in, and is he going to be the starter on day one? Is he going to be ready to be the starter on day one? I mean, he's certainly a remarkable physical talent, and that could be enough because, he's going to have to run and pass and everything else. And he could be one of those guys that does all the things and that gets you by. But it would certainly be really, really helpful to have a running back that's really good next to him. That would go a long, long way.
Yeah, because just with a new rookie quarterback, I mean, what are your
what are your expectations to start with?
Yes.
I mean, you presume that you're not going to go in there and win the AFC South. I mean, you presume that to start with, but you want to, like anything else, you just want to get your rookie quarterback off to a good start, and come away from year one with reasons to feel good about yourself. And even if that means he doesn't play, just have him in a position where he's learning, where he gets a lot out of it. I mean, either way, what you don't want is to put him in there and he goes 1-15 and he gets the crap kicked out of him. Now, obviously, it's worked out in the past that, you've had guys have horrible first seasons and everything goes all right. I mean, like, I'm pretty sure Manning's first year was horrendous.
It was bad. 4-13, I believe.
Got pounded, as I recall. I mean, that's a long time ago now. But you can survive it. But especially with a player like this, like, you want to set him up for success, whatever that means. And again, that might even mean not playing the whole first year. But he's your franchise. He's the guy that you're investing everything in for the future. When you put the number 4 pick into somebody, that's got to turn out. And they're, certainly they've had good track records, but, coming off the Luck situation, in the sense that you could still say, I mean, that's the last guy they picked to be a franchise quarterback. Obviously, they've taken these free agents since and tried to just continue, try to continue to have a successful team, over the last 5 years or whatever, just trying to piece things together at the quarterback position since Luck left. I guess that's 4 years, if I'm not mistaken. So yeah, I mean, it's been, they finally drafted a guy and said, this is our guy for the future. So it's just a lot of things got to go right. And obviously Richardson, you had to look at as a little bit of a project, not as much of a sure thing as Young or Stroud were, or at least appeared to be on paper. You got to have a lot of things go right with a quarterback like that. And so that this is the sort of thing that makes you nervous.
Absolutely. Let's see. Where are we, John? We good?
Break time.
Time to take a break. We've got lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Speed Radio. Dustin Dopirak with us. Mitt Winter joining us later. NCAA sports attorney. Plenty more right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the market for a new All right.
Yep. How was Big Ten Media Days? How was Tom?
I missed that day. I ended up getting sick on the second day.
I'm sorry. That sucks.
But yeah, I did. But seemed to go all right.
That's good.
The good thing is this is the last year for
the Big
that
Ten
they play
East.
that they play the Big Four.
Yeah, they're not going to miss that. They're not going to miss that.
If you look at next year's schedule, they really did them a favor by not giving them either Ohio State or Michigan. and they don't have to travel out west to play USC or UCLA. UCLA comes to Bloomington, but they don't have to go out west to play USC or anything.
Yeah, that is helpful. Let me look here. I haven't seen it yet. They have this up on. Oh, shoot. Yeah, so they do get Penn State at home. They get UCLA at home. On the road, they got what? Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, Wisconsin. That's entirely doable.
Oh yeah, if they can not implode this season, they're set up for some sort of success. Hopefully next year.
Yeah, I mean,
or even if let's just say they do implode and you have a new coach next year, then you have a decent first opportunity.
Yeah, exactly. And man, Tom's gonna have a tough time, man. This is not going to be easy.
We were talking about this with somebody else. If Tom just has a mediocre season, maybe barely misses a bowl game, he can almost argue, hey, our schedule, it's a lot more manageable next year. Give me one more shot at it, kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. I mean, he's got to get 5 wins.
At least.
Yeah, he's got to get. Let me see here. He's got to get Indiana State, Akron. We good yet?
We just got a couple seconds left till we come back.
Okay.
Y'all can keep talking about this when we come back on.
Also provides a wide variety of cheeses, gourmet sandwiches, entrees, a coffee bar, bread, pastries, all made fresh and mouthwatering. Stop by Feast Market and Cellar today.
This segment is brought to you by Feast Market and Cellar. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Monday, July 31st. Appreciate you joining us. Dustin Dopirak with me right now. Last week, Big Ten had their football media days and kind of closed it out for, I think that's pretty much it for all conferences. Now that should be wrapped up. And the thing about this year, this is the last year of divisions in the Big Ten. This is the last year without UCLA and USC in the Big Ten, but more importantly, the divisions. Indiana gets unshackled from having to play USC, UCLA,
Ohio State and Michigan.
Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State. Did we lose Dustin?
Yeah, I believe he accidentally disconnected. I'm sure he'll be back with us shortly. But yeah, definitely going to be a bit of a gift for Indiana football, no matter what the circumstances are and what the results are for this coming season.
Well, I don't know if you call it a gift. My God, it's they're just getting killed right now. I mean,
and I hate to say that anybody deserves an easy schedule, but from what Indiana has had to endure from the program, from their stance, the fact that in year one of the new divisions that they're not getting shafted by the conferences, honestly, it's one, it's a surprise, and two, it really is a gift that you avoid the two biggest powers and you avoid having to travel to the West Coast in the first year of it.
Absolutely. And 5 out of the last 7 years, I think, Dustin, Indiana has opened with a Big Ten opponent. That is like unbelievably crazy. I don't understand the point of that.
Yeah. Sorry, I got kicked off there. I get it because obviously the Big Ten is just doing it as a conference, and they're not necessarily taking it easy on Indiana. And some of the years it's been good, So some of the years that last year, they beat. It was last year they beat Illinois out of the gate, right? I'm like confusing my years at this point. But I think, because Basil had a big day and Camper had a big day. Sometimes it's good for them. Sometimes it's good for them to get out of the gate and go get a Big Ten win, and all of a sudden, hey, you're got some real momentum. It's not the same as just going and beating, an FCS opponent. It can be good for them. And I think, it gets them on TV sometimes, or, gets them in a prominent position on TV. This year, obviously, you get Ohio State out of the gate. That's a tougher deal. But, I get why the Big Ten made the move in the first place, to say, like, we're going to get out there as a league, so that we're playing conference games, the first weekend, and we're not, we are pushing our teams to go schedule spotlight games. Either you get, this conference game and you're going to be on TV, or you go get some major thing. Like we're going to try to minimize the amount of teams that on week one are playing an FCS opponent or a mid-major opponent or whatever. Like we're getting into the mix immediately. I get the logic of that. I get the reasoning to say, we're going to jump out there, make our teams jump out there on Labor Day weekend, and have games that people are making a point to go watch, rather than saying, okay, we're going to ease into this and you're going to start playing games that matter at the end of September. I get where they were coming from on that.
Absolutely. And with IU football, Tom Allen.
Am I cutting out, or are you cutting out?
No, it's me just hesitating. With the season, with the schedule, we know is going to become much easier next year. Does that give Tom Allen the next year or not? I mean, I still think you mentioned it. He's got to win 5 games, and I agree. I mean, there has to be this feeling that it's close for him to go forward, or I'm not sure what that they will do next. They may have to do something. Of course, we're at the beginning of the season, so there's no point in talking about that now. But I'm just curious, just thinking this, looking forward, it would sure, I'm sure Tom Allen would sure say, hey man, give me a shot with not having to have this schedule around my neck, and I would get it.
Did I get cut off? I'm back.
I think that was you that time. But okay. And shout out to Balin. How about Balin G coming, listening, watching from Greece? Man, I wish I was on one of the gondolas. We were on one of the gondolas right now. I
thought that was a Venice thing.
Well, wherever. That's
one of those. One of those peninsular countries out in the
somewhere in the Mediterranean,
where civilization was built. I don't know. So
yeah, but I was talking about how Tom Allen, if he doesn't get that a season next year, that's got to be really hard on him to think, man, it would have been nice to have a run, not having to play Ohio State, Michigan State, Penn State every year.
Yeah, no, I mean, that would go a long way. I mean, I think he's ultimately not going to be judged this year on what happens in those games. I think that's one big piece. I mean, and because I haven't been covering them, I've removed myself a little bit from this discussion in terms of, I got to be reminded, like, what's his buyout down to now, or what's it going to be at the end of this year? And so how, are they going to be able to go through a bad year 3? Can they do 3-9 and bring him back? Can they do 4-8 and bring him back? I don't know. I mean, that'd be 3 brutal years in a row, and it's tough to come back from that, regardless of who you're playing or what your schedule looks like. Like it's tough to be able to continue to recruit the more you lose, and the more players you get. So, I mean, I think I'm sure that if they do let him go and there's a change of direction there, that will be tough for him to say, man, it would have been nice to have a year where I don't have this. And you look at the schedule, 424, and it does, play out for them nice. Obviously, we don't have the dates yet as far as the Big Ten is concerned, but obviously know the opponents and the locations. And you're looking at, Maryland, Minnesota, Purdue, Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, and Wisconsin. I mean, you got Penn State, Wisconsin, UCLA, and all those are pretty tough looking. But Maryland, Minnesota, Purdue, Michigan State, Nebraska, Northwestern, those are all doable. Those are all, conceivably winnable games. That doesn't mean you're going to get them all, but it's conceivable. You look at this year's schedule, and it's obviously a little bit tougher. So, where are we at here? Let's look at this. You certainly have Penn State, Ohio State, Michigan as usual in the East. He can win enough games this year, that aren't those games that, that gets you to stick around. If you get Indiana State, if you get Louisville, if you get Akron, if you get Maryland, if you get Rutgers, if you get Illinois, if you get Michigan State, that's probably enough. That's probably enough to keep you around. And those aren't beating superpower teams. Like there are enough winnable games on the board to keep you in office. And so that's the big thing there, but it's just, are they good enough to win those? And if it's ultimately a question of, it's not that you weren't good enough to beat Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. It's that you weren't good enough to beat Illinois, Rutgers, and Maryland. And if that's the case, then you can't sit there and say, well, if I had this scheduled that next year I'd have been golden. No, like if you can't beat those teams now, who's to say you're gonna be able to beat them next year? What reason is there if you're Scott Dolson making that decision and Tom Allen, has this imaginary, argument with you about why he deserves to stay. If you're not beating the Illinois, the Rutgers, and the Marylands this year, why should I trust that you're going to beat Michigan State, Nebraska, and Minnesota next year? Like, what's my rationale? That your schedule's easier, but you haven't proven you can beat the teams you need to beat this year. Why would I trust that you can do it next year?
Absolutely. And how is this going to change the Big Ten now, doing away with these divisions? Because it has really, it's hamstrung half of the Big Ten East, whether it's Indiana, Maryland, Rutgers, when those teams have to play those other four teams every year, and then likely Wisconsin or Iowa. I mean, that is a beat down that very few programs have to take.
Yeah, I mean, exactly. And what it's created is this scenario where, the Big Ten West has this sort of rotating, group of teams that come through. Like you've obviously had all these different this pretty set dynamic for the entirety of the East-West, dynamic is that, like there is this arms race in the East where it's Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State. And, they have been the powerhouses of the whole league, and they have been the teams that have been challenging. Every year they beat the crap out of each other, and whoever comes out of that usually goes to the playoffs. Mostly it's been Ohio State, but it's been Michigan. Penn State's been close. They obviously won the Big Ten in 2016. They've been kind of on the precipice there. Ohio State and Michigan have been beyond them, but they've been sort of the clear third power in the league. And on the flip side, you have this Big Ten West where everybody's basically had a crack at it. I mean, I'm not sure who hasn't. I guess Nebraska. I don't know who hasn't won the West at least once in the time that there's been a West. I'm not sure if anybody has failed entirely to win the division. I'd have to go look at it. Maybe Minnesota hasn't, or did they win a couple years ago when they were really good? So, it's allowed for each of those teams to have a period where, a really good season that they could point to in these years. And meanwhile, in the East, you've had Maryland, Rutgers, and Indiana who have been buried, and that had they been in the West, they would have had a crack at it. Somewhere in that period, they would have had a crack at winning a division and going to a conference championship game and likely getting blown out. I mean, obviously what's certainly happened in the same way is while the West has been able to, rotate who's the best and had this sort of like king of the hill thing where everybody climbs up and is king for a day. They all go to Indianapolis in December and get the crap kicked out of them, just mercilessly. By Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, because they've just operating at a different scale. So how that dynamic is going to change is hard to say, especially if it's going to be a situation where you're going to have a 1 versus 2 playoff. You could continue to have a scenario where instead of it being, Ohio State kicks the crap out of Wisconsin or Iowa every year, or Northwestern for that matter, you have a scenario where it's Ohio State and Michigan every year, and it's just they play at the end of November and they have a rematch the following week. It's certainly possible that that's going to be the case. That's going to be the dynamic, but there's going to be all kinds of intermingling. And I mean, it makes things better for Indiana. I mean, I don't know if you're going to have that scenario where you're going to have somebody else get that other Big Ten championship spot on an annual basis. That there's going to be new teams that are going to have that experience. Again, it's nice to have that experience to be able to go play in it and say you're in a championship game, and then from there you get a spot in the Citrus Bowl, or you get a spot in the Outback Bowl or the Gator or whatever, and you get something prominent where you get to go to Florida and experience some sunshine in January, and it doesn't necessarily, like you've gone for a while without having something like that, and the winning the Big Ten West gives you an opportunity to do something like that. Where Indiana hasn't had as many of those. Certainly they had the couple in 2019 and 2020. But those teams at the bottom of the Big Ten East have had less access to something like that. But there's going to be more shakeup in the middle. You can be the 5th or 6th or 7th Big Ten team versus the 8th or 9th or 10th. In terms of just where you're shaking out. Obviously the playing in the Pac, bringing in those Pac-12 programs, the LA programs is just going to change the whole dynamic of travel. And again, just having two programs that bring something totally different, have a totally different recruiting footprint, or have a totally different collection of history, that's going to be a whole different ball game. And obviously you're going to, USC is going to be in some of those championship games. So it's not going to be Ohio State, Michigan every year. But that's on the flip side, another tough two more tough teams that you got to play. And, you might not have both of them on your schedule every year, but you get one of them that fills in for maybe one of the teams that you take off from the East.
Looking at basketball, the Hoosier basketball program, less expectations this year. At least I think, because last year everyone pinned them in as the co-favorite or the favorite to win the league, which probably wasn't fair after finishing 9th, no better than 9th in 6 years or whatever, to be given that top spot was probably not fair. But this year they won't be going into the season with Purdue and Michigan State kind of taking that mantle. But I wonder what the expectations really will be, not from the fans, because we know that's always high, but there is a lot of talent on the team. It's just a lot of youth.
Sure. No, I mean, they're going to be expected to be Indiana. I mean, I obviously haven't broken down the rosters like I did a year ago to say, okay, well, who deserves to be the favorite here? Who should be picked to win the league? And, I think, I'm sure Michigan State's going to be up there. I feel like they kept a lot of their guys. Am I wrong? I mean, Purdue is going to be Purdue and Michigan State, I think, will be favorites. Obviously Purdue's going to have Edey back, and the guards, Smith and Lawyer, and all, a lot of those depth front court guys, Trey Kaufman-Renn, Caleb First, Mason Gillis is still around. I mean, they're going to be favorites. And they're obviously going to be dealing with the idea of, simultaneously being a favorite and a team that lost to the 16th seed in the first round of the tournament and as a 1 seed. So as far there will also be the not even pressure, but oddly enough, joining that got beat by a 16 seed, fraternity means also everybody pointing out, well, what Virginia did after they got beat by a 16 is they went out and won the national championship. So Purdue, you can do that. So you're going to be looked at on some level, looked at it as missing expectations. So while Purdue is dealing with all that, Indiana will be looked at and say, well, this is just a whole new team. It's a whole new dynamic. It is a lot of talent. So I think there's going to be some expectation to do something because, you went out and got a 5-star in Backbow. You got all these should be impact transfers and guys like Kelly Ware and Peyton Sparks. And there's reason to look at this roster, and you bring back Xavier Johnson on a 6th year. So there's reason to look at this roster and say it should be pretty good. I mean, no one's going to say you better win the league or it's a disappointment. But I think everyone's going to say, all right, well, here's Mike Woodson's first year without Trace Jackson Davis. You went in, you had 2 seasons where you had an All-American caliber player who was established and, was a great college player. And basically, like, obviously he was always in a situation where you weren't sure what he was going to go NBA wise, but you knew the way the college game is vis-a-vis the NBA, that he was going to be super productive, and you get to be in a position where you can, darn near pencil in 20 and 10. You can legitimately pencil in 18 and 9 on a nightly basis from one guy. And you get a 5-star, in Jalen Hood-Schifino, and he turns into, just post lottery pick, a top 20 guy. And so you lose both of those. And it's like, okay, when you don't have that, when you have to reassemble, your roster, when you don't have a lot of pieces from the previous regime, what's that look like? What does your roster look like when it's really yours? When one of the foundational core pieces that you have is not a guy that you inherited? What's that going to look like? So, and it's also, I think one of my great questions with Woodson still at this point, and so obviously he's passed a lot of tests with flying colors, as we've talked about on this a lot, but how does he build a core? He has gone out and gotten great top line talent. And that's super important. So I don't want to diminish that and act like, well, that's one thing over here. But, you do have to have a bait. Like you have to have sort of, more insides, I guess, for lack of a better term. I mean, you certainly still have a Trey Galloway who's still around. Can you get guys like that, develop guys like that, that are, your sort of 4-year core guys on top of, the uber talents that you're getting in, first off, it was Hood-Schifino and even Renew to some extent last year. You still have Renew. Does he turn into the player that, the recruiting rankings say he should be? And does Ware become what his recruiting profile said he was supposed to be before he went to Oregon? Do those guys develop into that high level talent? But also, do you have the guys in between? Does Gabe Cupps become an immediate contributor? Does Ja'Kai Newton become an immediate contributor? Does Caleb Banks take a big step in a second year? Does CJ Gunn take a big step into being a real rotation, challenge for a starting job type of guy? Do those guys get there? And, do the other guys that you've brought in, make that kind of leap? Does, what's Peyton Sparks look like? As a guy who's really, productive at Ball State? What all of those guys become? I mean, you're really just reimagining an offense. Right now, nobody's established as your number one priority as far as getting the ball to them. What does that offense look like when it doesn't have a predetermined, base, whereas Jackson Davis, was the base of the offense, the base of the team, the base of everything the last couple of years. When you don't have that predetermined, going in, what do you create? And I think that's going to be an interesting question for Woodson to see how what that becomes when, a lot of those big questions aren't answered to start and he has to answer them.
Dustin Dopirak, I appreciate you, my friend. Look forward to it again next week.
Sounds good, Jim. See you then.
Thank you, sir. Dustin Dopirak from the Indy Star. Make sure you're giving him a follow both on Twitter and at the Star. Back with Mitt Winter, sports attorney from Kansas City, right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington. Good morning, Mitt. You got us?
Yep. How's it going, guys?
How are you, man?
Doing pretty good.
So you played for William and Mary?
I did. Yep. A long time ago.
Very cool.
Do you guys mind if I leave my camera off?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, cool. I'm in Massachusetts with a little family vacation, so I haven't showered or anything yet this morning.
Massachusetts.
Yep, Cape Cod. We have some family out here.
Oh wow! See, I've always wanted to go there.
Yeah, it's nice. It's beachy type stuff.
I always wanted to take my daughter there.
Yeah, should do it.
Cape Cod.
Cape Cod.
What does one do in Cape Cod?
Oh, lots of different beaches, seafood. I don't know, just lots of outdoor activities, little towns you can poke around in. If you're a baseball fan, there's the Cape Cod Baseball League. It's like the best college summer league. It's kind of fun to go to those games. They play with wood bats.
Oh, wow.
So
Free baseball. Free baseball?
Yeah, games are free to get into. Yeah, they play on high school fields, so you're sitting like right along the baseline. It's pretty cool. A lot of the guys end up playing in the majors, so it's kind of fun. You guys in Indianapolis?
Bloomington.
Bloomington, okay. Gotcha.
Close enough.
Mm-hmm.
Close enough. Thanks for doing this. I appreciate you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me on. Glad it worked out.
So NIL's probably been kind of a boon for you then.
There's been a lot of NIL stuff going on. Yep, that is for sure. But it's fun though. I enjoy it. You guys focus mostly on basketball or just kind of all the Indiana sports?
Actually, anything. It doesn't have to be Indiana, but Indiana, Purdue, Colts, Pacers. We have people on every day that's involved with all of those in some form or another.
Yep, gotcha.
And whatever's important. I mean, NIL, PGA golf.
Mm-hmm. All right, 30 seconds, guys. Here we go.
Corner of Patterson and Rogers in Bloomington offers a variety of freshly made fare, tying their roots in limestone with their love of Southern eateries. With quality, local, and organic food as their main focus, Southern Stone strives to always provide their guests with an exceptional dining experience. With weekly specials, quick, attentive service, Southern Stone Restaurant provides delicious, 5-star comfort food with a Southern charm at 2-star prices. Southern Stone Restaurant is part of Endeavor Hospitality's Wow Club.
This segment is brought to you by Courtroom Sports Grill in Bedford. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back. It's Monday, July 31st. Thanks a lot for being with us here on Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Joined now by Mitt Winter from Kenny Hertz Perry LLC, sports attorney dealing with NIL and lots of other things. But NIL has had to be a boon for you, Mitt.
Yeah. I was working in college sports on the legal side before NIL, was allowed for college athletes. But since, over the past 2 years and change, the NIL related work has definitely increased a lot. And so doing a lot of different things in that world, and I really enjoy it. Background as a former college basketball player and already having worked in the space. It's a lot of fun to kind of work in this new industry where things are changing all the time. It keeps you on your toes.
Yeah, a former basketball player at William and Mary, that has to make a huge difference for if I was it doesn't matter what the case may be, but in this case, it's an athlete. If I was an athlete looking for an attorney, I would definitely prefer one that had actually participated in what I'm doing and would have a much better feeling of what they have gone through.
Yeah, it definitely helps with, give you a better understanding of just kind of what's going on behind the scenes at a school or with the NCAA or whatever it might be. You kind of know, what people are going through on a day-to-day basis, which definitely gives you some insight that someone who wasn't a former college athlete might not have. So I definitely think it's helpful.
And the next step for these athletes after NIL, first of all, it just seems inevitable. It's going to have to have some congressional intervention because the states are kind of screwing this up, in my opinion. When you have a state like Missouri who enacts a law that is exactly opposite of what the NCAA says you can do, that's kind of ridiculous, in my opinion, for them to do that. But anyway,
you're looking at potentially having 50 different sets of laws for states.
Yeah, I mean, right now there are 7 different federal bills that have been drafted or introduced this session. I'm not confident that any of them are going to pass. Number one, I don't think any of them will generate enough bipartisan support to get the votes they need. And then number two, when you have 7 bills out there, it just kind of divides everyone's attention on the issue. And I don't think anyone's going to be able to coalesce around one of these bills. And just kind of on the topic more broadly, I'm not necessarily in favor of a federal bill that just talks about, limiting the rights of college athletes to monetize their NILs. I think there are better ways to address it, whether that's through the NCAA or trying to reach some sort of agreement with the athletes, whatever it may be. But either way, I don't think we're going to see a federal bill this year. And if it doesn't happen this year, it kind of remains to be seen what the NCAA and the conferences who are kind of the ones pushing for a federal bill will do after that. There's been talk. There were some recent meetings actually out in Indianapolis last week, and they're supposed to meet again this week, kind of talking about, what's going to be our plan B for NIL if we can't get a federal bill passed. And so we'll kind of see what comes out of that.
Like I mentioned Missouri, and the reason I mentioned it is they passed a law that allows coaches to participate in these deals for the athletes, where the NCAA does not allow that to take place. How is that going to be rectified in the interim?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's a question of whether the NCAA is going to try and challenge some of these state laws, or just kind of let the states do their thing until either a federal bill is passed or something else happens. But I personally don't think the NCAA is going to go to any of these states and try and challenge these state laws. That could be some messy litigation for them. And it's similar to what happened 2 years ago when states started passing laws that said the NCAA can't enforce its NIL rules, and athletes in those states have to be able to monetize their NIL in general. The NCAA could have challenged some of those laws, but it decided, we're not going to challenge those laws. We're just going to change our rules. It's a little bit different here because some of these state laws are saying, NCAA, you can't come in and enforce your rules in our state. But I just don't see the NCAA going in and challenging one of these states that has, varying laws that kind of contradict some of the NCAA stuff.
No, the modus operandi has generally been to either not allow that state to host NCAA championships, so no school that was in there could host an NCAA event, or the possibility of banning schools from those states that do that from NCAA events.
Both of those things are possible. I think they're probably pretty unlikely as well, because these state laws, they say this NCAA cannot, punish or penalize schools in any way for participating in activities allowed under these state laws. So again, if the NCAA does try and penalize a school for doing something allowed under its state law, I think pretty quickly we'll have some litigation that would happen. I could see a state attorney general suing the NCAA in a situation like that. And I don't know if you guys paid attention at all to what happened with Tennessee recently when they were penalized by the NCAA. But the NCAA was considering, a postseason bowl ban for the football team. And before the NCAA was able to come out with their penalties for Tennessee's attorney general sent a letter to the NCAA saying, we have a state law that says you cannot interfere with college athletes' rights to monetize their NIL in any way. And if you give the football team a bowl ban, you're going to be violating that law. So think about that before you penalize the football team. And who knows whether that had any effect on the penalty that the NCAA gave to Tennessee football, but they didn't end up giving them a postseason bowl ban. They gave them a pretty hefty fine instead.
Yeah, and that also makes you wonder, as has always been the case, how sharp are the teeth of the NCAA? They seem to have been dulled even more so now than what they were before.
Yeah, that's true. And especially as I think we'll see more states pass laws similar to the ones that have been passed in Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Missouri, New York now. And as that continues on, is that going to weaken the NCAA even more and kind of dull the teeth that they, do still have? So it's kind of putting the NCAA in a hard situation. Are they going to let states continue to pass these laws that kind of weaken their authority, or at some point are they going to say, well, we're to that point where we have to try and penalize one of these schools, no matter what's going to happen, if they're going to sue us or not, just because if we don't, then, we're becoming more irrelevant by the day.
What's next with NIL? I mean, we've seen some complaints from coaches, and it cracks me up. It's the coaches that complaining from the SEC, and I'm kind of laugh because I'm like, you guys have been doing NIL for years, and for them to be the one that is complaining really makes me laugh.
Yeah, I mean, everybody always complains about the tampering they say that's going on, and how NIL is making, affecting the competitive balance. But as you touched on, in my opinion, there's not a whole lot of competitive balance in recruiting already anyway. Everyone knows the top 15, 20 schools that are going to get most of the 5-star and lots of 4-star guys. I personally don't think NIL has affected that in any way. I do think the coaches do have some valid arguments on, how easy it is for the players to move, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. If they're actually going to be treated as students, they have to be allowed to transfer kind of whenever they want. But it makes it hard to manage a roster when you don't know who's going to be on your team from year to year. So I get some of those complaints, and I think there are some ways that can be addressed as well. But it's gonna take talking with players and agreeing on rules that they've had a hand in making. And I don't think the NCAA is just going to be able to impose any additional transfer restrictions on players. But you do see some of the federal laws kind of trying to address that as well. So we'll see what happens there.
Well, yeah, because college athletes now have greater authority over their own careers than pro athletes do. Pro athletes have contracts, at least. These guys can move at will, and it is really screwing programs up, in my opinion. You mentioned the coaches don't know who their teams are going to be year to year. You've got to re-recruit your own players year to year now. That, to me, I think that there has to be some kind of commitment from these players, whether it's a 2-year commitment, I don't care. It does not have to be 4, but I think that there has to be some kind of commitment, because they're getting all the benefits now without any having to put out any strain.
Yeah, I do agree with you. If the players were able to enter and the teams were able to enter into agreements, or contracts like they do in pro sports that says you'll be here for at least 2 years, and here's the other terms of your agreement, I think that would be better for both sides. It just provides more certainty from the player side and from the team and the coach side. So I'm definitely in favor of that, and whether we'll get to that at some point where you see the athletes, as employees of the university or their team or some other entity, I do think that would make things a lot easier for everyone involved.
Well, and that's another thing I wanted to ask. Is it just a matter of time before they're employees, or there is profit sharing something? Because you have teams like Oklahoma football, and every scholarship player on Oklahoma's team is making $70,000 minimum. Every guy across the board. Then you've got a team like, say, Indiana. They don't have that. And that's their fault. They don't have that commitment to football, but they're going to have to in some form. Now they're getting some help now because the Big Ten is going to do away with divisions, and they're not going to have to play Penn State, Michigan State, and Ohio State every single year. So that helps a team like Indiana and Maryland and Rutgers. But also the money thing. They've got to get to a point to where they're sharing, to where it's more of an even playing field again.
Yeah, I do. On the employment issue, I do think we'll see that happen at some point in the relatively near future. There are a couple proceedings that are pending right now that are asking either a court or the National Labor Relations Board to find that at least certain athletes, we're talking mostly Power 5, football, Division I basketball, men's and women's, are employees of the university, their conferences, and or the NCAA. So I think that's definitely going to happen at some point. And then in terms of kind of what you're talking about with the revenue sharing, I mean, the way NIL is right now, the dollars are basically being funded by donors. And so that's, kind of all over the place, depending on whether your school, supports football, does it support basketball, or some other sport, kind of where the donors want to put their money. But I do agree with you that long term, it probably makes more sense to have, whether they're still called NIL dollars or it's just revenue sharing, that money coming directly from the schools or the conferences, because those are the entities that are receiving the big checks from the TV broadcast revenue. And that's probably the money that should be shared with the athletes. I don't think you should be relying long term on donors to be funding the payments for the athletes, because like you said, that's kind of all over the place.
And then is every sport, every athlete in every sport going to get paid? Because that's, to me now, you're borderline ridiculous, because football pays maybe with basketball, but it pays for every other sport at a school. So why should these sports be paying these athletes?
Yeah, I agree. I don't think we'll see a world where every athlete is getting paid. Title IX makes things a little tricky, but if I were able to snap my fingers and we could create a new model for college athletics, as you mentioned, football, and in a lot of cases, men's basketball, especially if you take into account the NCAA's tournament contract, which is about $1 billion a year. Those athletes, in my opinion, deserve more of that revenue. And the other sports that are reliant on that revenue, I think there are other ways to come up with funding models for those sports, whether it's, from Olympic programs or wherever that funding is coming from. But I think kind of just the whole model needs to be reimagined to take into account a lot of those factors, because a lot of the pushback that there is to changing the model as well, football and to some extent basketball, are the ones funding all these other sports. And if we give more of that money to those athletes, then how are we going to pay for these other sports? But I think there are ways to do it.
Mitt, what is it that you guys do mostly for sports athletes?
So most of the stuff that I do in the NIL space, I represent some universities. I represent a lot of NIL collectives kind of all over the country. I represent a bunch of different NIL startup businesses doing different things in this space to take advantage of the changing rules. And I have represented some athletes as well. A lot of what I've done for athletes is helping them negotiate agreements with agents, which is important before a college athlete signs a deal with an agent, to have someone, at least review it for them and potentially help negotiate some of the terms. You can negotiate the commission rates and things like that. Is an agent going to take a commission from a collective? If they are, how much is it? What's the commission going to be on other deals they bring to you? So that's kind of where my focus has been in the NIL space.
What percentage of today's athlete would you say has an agent now?
It's still a very low percentage. Most of the athletes that have agents are, more your high profile football, basketball players. There's some other athletes in other sports that, may have a really big social media following, and so they can get a lot of NIL deals thrown at them who have agents as well. If we're talking percentage, if we're talking all NCAA college athletes, I would say it's, definitely in the single digits percentage and probably under 5%. It's still not a very big number. But if you're talking basketball, football at the P5 level, it's probably higher than that, but it's still not a majority of guys that have agents.
What's the biggest change you expect over the next year or so?
A lot of it's going to depend on what happens with a federal NIL law and what the NCAA is going to do with what they're calling their Plan B. But I think we'll continue to see some more NIL activities move in-house at universities. Kind of what you've seen down in Texas A&M. They're planning on moving a lot of their NIL activity into their athletics fundraising arm, which is a separate entity from the university. And some other universities are planning similar things. Depending on what happens with the federal law and the NCAA rules, I think we'll see more of that, just because the schools, they do want to provide more NIL resources to their athletes, and they kind of want to be more involved in the process as well. Some of them are still a little unsure of having these collectives, which are run by boosters, kind of being the ones in control of the NIL process, and they'd like to step in there a little bit more.
All right, man, I cannot thank you enough, man. I appreciate you taking the time out in the middle of your vacation.
No problem. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. Look forward to doing it again sometime.
Yeah, definitely. Anytime.
Mitt Winter from Winter Sports Law and Kenny Hertz Perry LLC. Appreciate you, my friend. Have a good rest of your week.
You too. I'll talk to you later.
Thank you, sir. We've got lots more coming up here on Indiana Sports Speed Radio. We'll be back with it right after this.
We'll be right back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
If you're in the
Shoot, I realized I just cleared my throat with my microphone on. My apologies.
it should be a federal law. When you buy cheese, they have to put paper between the slices.
Oh, really? Why, so they don't stick?
Yeah. Apparently, you don't do the shopping.
No, I do. I just don't buy cheese very often. And when I do, it's usually shredded cheese.
Oh, it's usually shredded cheese.
I
Yesterday,
can talk like that if you want me to.
Yesterday, it was so funny because
10 seconds.
They were playing one of the comeback things in your voice, and it sounded just like it. I started laughing. Passion and your thirst.
This segment is brought to you by Bubba's 33 in Clarksville. Pizza, burgers, beer. Now back to the Golf Club at Eagle Point Studios for more Indiana Sports Beat Radio with Jim Coyle, presented by Endeavor Hospitality Group and Andy Moore Honda of Bloomington.
Welcome back, Indiana Sports Beat Radio here on this Monday, July 31st. Jim Coyle with you. Thanks a lot for joining us. Appreciate you. Just finished up with Mitt Winter from Kenny Hertz Perry LLC. Winter sports law, sports attorney, talking about the many tides and turns of the world of NIL. Oh yeah, Kevin, I was in the break. I was complaining that it should be a federal law that when you buy cheese from the grocery store, sliced cheese, that they put the stupid papers between them. I mean, I got a big old pound of block. It's like having a block of cheese now, except for you can't slice it with a slicer. It's crazy.
You seen that Burger King in, I don't know if it's Thailand or if it's a different Asian country, but they have it's a cheeseburger, but there's no actual burger. It's literally just like a pound of cheese between two buns. As Jim steps away from his microphone. But it's if you're listening and you've hopefully you haven't tried one of those, it sounds absolutely disgusting. But if you are and you have tried it, then well, for a couple things. First of all, you must have gone overseas and had the wherewithal to try one of those things. And if not, maybe you had somebody ship one to you. And that's dedication right there. If you're the kind of person that would have someone ship you a pound of cheese in place of a burger, then you are you're one cool cat, as they would say.
So that's the best you can do to fill in?
Well, I didn't know you were going to jump away because when I popped in, I was asking you a question and then you just kind of
I know,
left.
but yeah, sometimes that happens in life.
Have you heard of that Burger King cheeseburger without a burger? It's pretty. Look up a picture of it. It's interesting.
Well, what is it? A beef?
No, there's literally no beef. It's just a bunch.
No, I know
cheese
beans
slices.
That can't be a burger, man.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with you there.
It cannot be a burger. Let's see. What is this, July? So we've got. When does the Little League World Series start?
It's a good question. I know there's a team from Lexington that is advancing. I don't know if they're in the World Series yet, but they're making their first bid or trying to make one of their first bids in several years. At least that's locally for me.
Just reading defending daggone it. Defending the offensive coordinator Nathaniel Hackett, New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers jumped into the Sean Payton controversy Sunday with a scathing rebuke of the Denver Broncos coach. I love how this stuff is getting out there. It made me feel bad that someone who has accomplished a lot in this league is that insecure that they have to take another man down to set themselves up for some easy fall. It doesn't go well for that team this year. Rodgers told, what's the deal with Sean Payton all of a sudden?
I think he's just old and cranky.
I'm like, what? Yeah, what's the deal with that? What's the deal with that? Speaking of the Little League World Series, when does that start?
I tell you what, I wish I was Now, I only know that I wish I was more into the Little League World Series, but it's not always been the thing that has piqued my interest.
It's just, I don't even know how to explain it, man. If you don't like the Little League World Series, there's something wrong with you.
It was definitely one of those things where I feel like if you grew up watching it,
I didn't grow up watching it. I mean, I grew up playing it as a kid.
Well, that's the other thing too. Yeah, if you played Little League baseball, and I actually did for a short time. I quit playing baseball once. I did 1 year of kid pitch, and I didn't like getting hit with the ball, so I quit doing baseball.
Let's see. Oh my gosh. When? All right. When's
Ed says August 16th is when the Little League World Series.
Man,
is.
that late? Holy cow!
It does seem late.
The Great Lakes Region Tournament, which is Indiana, is in Whitestown, August 5th through the 9th. So that's coming up this week, the end of this week. Next week, basically. So it's starting Saturday. That's the Central region for Indiana. That's Indiana's region, the Great Lakes region, rather. I just said Central. It's the Great Lakes Region Tournament. And the Central Region headquarters are in Indianapolis or Whitestown. And it's in Whitestown. So there you go. It's on, baby. 16th through the 27th. And then that'll lead right into college football.
Bring it on.
It's all about here, man. Hey, there's just something exciting about college football games. It's just a little different than going to a basketball game or just a little. It's just different.
Well, it's because college football is more of an event. I mean, it only happens once a week. It's usually an all day. I mean, you have to dedicate your entire day to the game if you're going
not just once a week. Sometimes it only happens once every 3 weeks at home.
And that's true for home matches, or I don't know why I'm saying matches.
And speaking of Indiana, they play basically 4 out of their
first 6 or 7 at home.
So they have 6 home games, and one is the game in Indianapolis against Louisville. But they play 4 out of their home games in the first 5 weeks, something like that. Is that right?
Actually, they'll play Ohio State, Indiana State, and Akron all at Memorial Stadium.
3 weeks in a row.
Louisville is sandwiched in between week 3 in Lucas Oil Stadium. Then
Between
you'll play
week 3 and
2
what?
conference games, week 3 of the season.
So U of L is week 3.
Yes. Then you'll play 2 conference road games. You'll travel to Maryland and then Michigan. You'll come back home for Rutgers.
Wait a minute.
You'll travel to Penn State.
Hold on. Okay. What happened to the other 2 non-conference games?
There's only 3.
No.
Indiana State, Louisville, and Akron.
All right. So when's Indiana State?
That's week 2.
Okay. So ISU. And then what's week 4?
Week 4 is Akron.
What's week 5?
Maryland on the road. Week
All right,
6
so
is
in the first
Michigan.
4 weeks, in the first month, they play 3 home games and a game at Indianapolis then. Correct?
Yep. Correct. Your first 4 games, you won't travel away out of state.
And the next 2 months, they only have 2 home games.
3 home games.
3
you
home
get to
games.
play Rutgers for homecoming. You get to play Wisconsin, and then you get Michigan State.
Yeah, that's going to be something. Michigan State at home, that's winnable.
It is. That's why even though we don't know the ceiling for this Indiana football team, if they can show signs of improvement, there are winnable games on this schedule that can get you where you want to go. And obviously, we're not talking playoffs or division championships or anything like that, but any sort of marked improvement before you get this ease up on your schedule next season, if you can show something to get you through this last year of the divisions, then that's what you want if you're Tom Allen or if you're Indiana football. Just something.
Something. Speaking of something, we got something tomorrow. Mike DeCourcy, Chronic Hoosier. Anything else going on tomorrow?
I believe that's it in terms of guests.
Beautiful. Lovely. Cannot thank everybody enough today. Mitt Winter, of course, sports attorney. Big thanks to Dustin Dopirak, as always, and a gigantic thanks to John, the producer, for keeping us between the white lines. More importantly, thanks to you guys. Without you, we have no reason to be here, and we couldn't be happier about it. We're happy to be along with you each and every day. Look forward to doing it again tomorrow. Until then, I'm Jim Coyle. I will see you on the radio.
Thanks for listening to Indiana Sports Beat Radio. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube page for more clips and team coverage of Indiana basketball, football, and more. You can also find full episodes and tons of other content on thehoosier.com. We'll see you next time for another edition of Indiana Sports Beat Radio.